You ever walk into a room and instantly feel 16 again? That's exactly what happened to me last Thanksgiving. See, I'm 30 years old now. On paper, I'm a colonel in the United States Army Cyber Command. Young for the rank, sure, but I've worked my ass off for every inch of it. But when I pull into my parents' driveway, it's like none of that matters. The cracked steps, the chipped welcome mat, even the same old minivan out front. It's all frozen in time. And the second I step inside, I'm no longer Colonel Juliet Dane. I'm just the daughter who never followed the plan. Now let me back up. 5 years ago, I left this house without looking back. I was tired of being the family disappointment. My dad wanted me in business school, working under him at Westbridge Technologies, the defense contractor he basically worships. My brother Logan, he fit that mold perfectly. Business degree, corner office, promotions on schedule. Meanwhile, me, I threw it all away on military service. I'll never forget the last real conversation with my dad before I left. He said, "The Army is for people who don't have real options." Imagine hearing that from your own father. That sentence burned into me, and I carried it into every deployment, every promotion, every sleepless night leading a cyber team against foreign threats. And here's the ironic twist. Tomorrow morning at 900 sharp, I'll be sitting in a Westbridge Technologies boardroom, not as his daughter, not as Logan's little sister, but as the Pentagon liaison with final approval authority on the very contract my father and brother are working on. They don't know it yet. Tonight, to them, I'm still the girl who never measured up. Tomorrow, the silence is going to speak louder than any speech I could give. But let's start with tonight. Dinner at my parents' house hasn't changed in a decade. My mom calls from the kitchen without even looking up. "Juliet, it's open." Same floral smell, same wall of photos. My brother's graduation, his wedding, his 2 kids. My pictures? Missing. Not even my commissioning portrait, the one I mailed them with so much pride. It's like my military career didn't exist. We sit down to roast beef, mashed potatoes, and the same side salad we've eaten since I was 10. Logan is in top form, confident, polished, bragging about corporate restructures and his new promotion leading the systems integration team. My dad beams like Logan just cured cancer. And me? I smile politely, sip water, and let them talk. Because here's the truth. You don't argue with people who've already decided who you are. You just let time do the talking. Later, I sit on the edge of my childhood twin bed, staring at trophies and certificates that froze my worth at age 18. Basketball awards, honor roll ribbons, college acceptance letters, but nothing beyond the moment I chose the Army. To them, everything after was a waste. And I know some of you watching have felt this exact same thing. Maybe your family wrote you off because you didn't take the safe path. Maybe you chose art over accounting, or started a small business instead of going to med school. Whatever your story, you know that sting of being invisible at your own dinner table. Here's the kicker though. While my dad and Logan are bragging downstairs, the irony is almost too perfect. Logan just got promoted to lead the very team on the very project I oversee for the Pentagon. Project Sentinel. Tomorrow, when I walk into that boardroom in full uniform, the entire narrative shifts. And let me tell you something. When you're underestimated long enough, the sweetest revenge isn't a fight. It's showing up prepared, calm, and undeniable. That night, I pulled my uniform out of the suitcase. Midnight blue, pressed to perfection, the silver eagle insignia shining under the lamp, every ribbon aligned, every button polished. My hands moved like muscle memory, ritual over emotion. Because tomorrow wasn't about payback. It wasn't about sticking it to them. It was about presence. It was about letting my work, my position, and my authority speak louder than my father's disappointment or my brother's condescension ever could. And I'll be honest with you, sitting there, polishing that insignia, I thought about how many of us walk around with the weight of other people's opinions strapped to our backs. We think if we just succeed enough, maybe they'll finally see us. Maybe they'll finally respect us. But that night, I realized something important. Even if they never saw me, I was still real, still worthy, still enough. The next morning came fast. I drove my rented black SUV into the Westbridge lot, parked in the space marked Military Liaison, DoD Authorized. When I stepped out in full uniform, people noticed. Heads turned. Security guards snapped to attention. "Good morning, Colonel." That's the respect I'd never gotten at my parents' dinner table. The same girl they thought was wasting her potential was now the one with final approval authority on their biggest contract. But before I walked into that boardroom, before my brother would stumble through a presentation under my review, I stopped for just a second in the lobby, took a breath, because this wasn't just about a meeting. This was about walking into the story they wrote for me and rewriting it in real time. When those elevator doors slid open, the first face I saw was my brother, Logan. He was standing by the window with his shiny presentation tablet, radiating the same confidence I'd watched him perfect since high school. His posture said, "I've got this whole place on a string," until he saw me. For a split second, he froze. His eyes flicked over my uniform, the insignia, the badge, clipped to my chest. He tried to laugh it off. "Jules, why are you, what's with the getup?" But before I could even answer, my father rounded the corner, mid-conversation with two executives. He stopped cold. His voice dropped. "Juliet, what is this? Why are you dressed like that?" And right on cue, the CEO of Westbridge, Lorraine Hart, a woman with short white hair and presence you could feel across the room, walked straight toward me, smiling like we were old colleagues. "Colonel Dane," she said warmly, "so glad you're joining us in person. Everyone, this is our Pentagon liaison for Project Sentinel. She has final approval authority on military integrations." Boom, just like that. My father's face drained of color. My brother looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to flex or defend my choices. The room did that for me. Now, let me pause here for a second, because I want you to picture that moment in your life. Maybe it's not a boardroom. Maybe it's the day you finally get the keys to your own apartment after years of people telling you you'd never make it out. Or the day you quietly launch a business, and the same friends who laughed at you suddenly ask for advice. The point is, sometimes the most powerful statement isn't words, it's presence. The meeting began promptly at 0900. Lorraine opened with a few remarks, then handed the floor to me. And I'll be honest, the room shifted instantly. I wasn't the daughter. I wasn't the sister. I was the ranking officer in charge of whether this multi-million-dollar project moved forward. I briefed them on milestones. outlined upcoming Pentagon requirements, and emphasized where standards weren't negotiable. I made eye contact with each department head. I asked for data, not promises. And I kept my tone professional, not cold, but commanding. Then came Logan's turn. He stood slowly, trying to maintain his composure. As systems integration lead, he launched into his rollout strategy. But his voice faltered, his points stumbled. It wasn't that the plan was bad, it just wasn't ready. When he finished, I waited a beat, then said, in the same neutral voice I'd use with any project lead, "Mr. Dane, could you clarify how your proposed method accounts for the latency threshold specified in our last Pentagon memo?" You could have heard a pin drop. Logan blinked, stammered, I can revisit that portion." "You'll need to," I replied. "Our benchmarks are non-negotiable. Please revise the draft and submit it by close of business Thursday." And here's the part that mattered. I didn't say it to humiliate him. I said it because it was my job. But for the first time in our lives, the roles had flipped. He wasn't the golden child being praised at dinner. He was an employee being evaluated by his superior, and everyone in that room knew it. By noon, the meeting wrapped. Executives filed out with polite nods and tight smiles. My nameplate sat at the head of the table beside the CEO's. When I finally stepped into the hallway, I saw my dad standing there, arms folded, jaw tight. Not angry, confused, almost hollow. My mother had even shown up, waiting in one of the visitor chairs. My brother leaned against the window, still processing. It felt like walking into a courtroom. My childhood jury assembled once again. "How long have you been a colonel?" my father asked finally. "6 months," I replied. He repeated it like it didn't compute. 6 months, and you didn't tell us." I held his gaze. "I did. I sent invitations to the promotion ceremony, emails, articles, even left voicemails. None of you responded." My mother's voice broke the silence. "We didn't understand what it meant. Colonel, it sounds high, but we didn't know." "Why didn't you explain?" she asked. And here's where my truth spilled out. Because I stopped trying to justify my worth. Every time I called, the first question was about Logan's projects or Dad's quarterly numbers. You never asked about me unless it was to suggest I quit and come home. Logan muttered, "We thought you were stuck, like just moving base to base, never really going anywhere." I looked at him squarely. "Last night, you said soldiers just follow orders. You laughed when you said it, and you never asked what I was really doing." That landed. He shifted uncomfortably. For once, the silence belonged to me. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Military cyber work isn't just following orders. It's leading teams under pressure. It's protecting networks that hold the backbone of our national defense. It's the reason hackers haven't shut down the very companies we all rely on. And yet, in my own house, none of that ever mattered. So standing there, in that office with my family, looking at me like they were seeing me for the first time, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg for recognition anymore. "I want nothing," I said quietly, "except respect for my work, for my choices, for the fact that I didn't fail just because I didn't follow your blueprint." For the first time, my brother looked me in the eye without competition. "You evaluated me today," he admitted, "and you were fair. You didn't tear me apart. You just did your job, and you were commanding." That might have been the first genuine compliment I'd ever heard from him. My dad cleared his throat, the way he does when emotions creep up. He extended a hand, not for show, but in the same gesture I've seen at countless promotion ceremonies, a quiet offer of respect. "Colonel Dane," he said, his voice rough, "I owe you an apology. I underestimated you completely." I took his hand, firm, steady. "I accept." Now, don't get me wrong. This wasn't some Hollywood ending where violins start playing and everyone cries into a group hug. But it was real. It was the first crack in a wall that had stood my entire life. And that's what I want you to hear. You don't always need the perfect speech to change the story. Sometimes, you just need to show up in full truth, with proof no one can deny. That day, I didn't just walk into a boardroom. I walked into the story my family had written for me, and rewrote it with every step I took. 6 months later, my apartment in Washington, D.C. felt like a different world from that little house I'd grown up in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Potomac. My bookshelf was lined with cyber defense manuals, a few framed commendations, and just enough medals to remind me who I was without overwhelming the room. That night, my family came over for dinner. My table, my ground. And let me tell you, there's something powerful about inviting people into your space, where the walls finally hold your story instead of theirs. My dad arrived first. In his hands, not a bottle of wine, not a lecture, but a framed article. It was a feature in Defense Journal about the success of Project Sentinel. My picture was on the front, me in full dress uniform, standing alongside General Armstrong and CEO Lorraine Hart. Dad handed it to me like it was something fragile. "Figured you might want a copy. I've had it up in my office for a few months now." That stopped me. For the first time in my life, he wasn't hiding my accomplishments. He was displaying them. My mom showed up a few minutes later, carrying a warm pie. "Apple. Still your favorite, right?" she asked with a hopeful smile. It was. She glanced around the apartment, organized, clean, almost military in its order. "I don't know how you keep it this way." I almost cracked a joke, military habit, but I didn't. She was trying. That was enough. Logan and his wife came last, carrying an expensive bottle of wine. He was quieter than usual, less corporate peacock, more brother. We ate. We laughed awkwardly at first, then easier as the night went on. After dinner, Logan pulled me aside. "I implemented that rollout structure you mentioned," he admitted. "The team fought me at first, but it works better than what we had. Eventually, I gave you credit." I smirked. "Eventually?" He grinned sheepishly. "I let them think I was a genius for about 5 minutes first." That was the first time we shared a joke that wasn't at my expense. Across the room, I saw my dad lingering by the bookshelf. His eyes traced over the medals until they stopped at one in particular, a citation for countering a foreign cyber attack that almost crippled federal networks. "I read about that breach," he said softly. "Didn't realize you were leading it." I was. He didn't add anything. He just nodded. Respect doesn't always come with speeches. Sometimes it's as simple as a nod that says, "I see you now." Later, over coffee and my mother's apple pie, my dad raised his glass. His voice cracked just a little. "To Colonel Juliet Dane," he said, "who proved that worth isn't found in following someone else's path, but in walking your own." We all raised our glasses, And for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never felt in that family before: recognition. But here's the twist, the part I want to leave with you. The real victory wasn't in my father finally seeing me. It wasn't in my brother's compliment or my mother's pie. The real victory was realizing I didn't need their recognition to be enough, because that's the trap so many of us fall into. We think if we just work hard enough, if we just rack up enough achievements, one day the people who doubted us will finally say, "You made it." But let me tell you from experience, you don't need their permission slip to matter. The moment I walked into that boardroom in uniform, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about clarity, about finally understanding that even if they never saw me, I was still real, still worthy, still enough. And maybe that's where this story meets yours. Maybe you've been underestimated, ignored, or told your path wasn't good enough. Maybe you've spent years trying to earn applause from people who don't even know the weight of the road you walk. Here's my advice. Stop waiting for their validation. Build anyway, rise anyway, and when the day comes, show up fully, calmly, undeniably. Because the strongest proof isn't in what you say, it's in who you quietly become. Your worth isn't defined by whether people see it, approve of it, or clap for it. Your worth is already in the work, the persistence, and the courage to walk your own path. Recognition is nice, but it's not the destination. If this story resonated with you, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Drop a comment below. Tell me about a time you were underestimated and what you did about it. And of course, hit like if this gave you something to think about tonight. Because here on this channel, we're building a community of people rewriting their own stories. One choice, one step, one quiet victory at a time.